By the posting of this video, it'll be just about the 50th anniversary of Jaws.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
It's one of the most iconic movies ever made. It's been called the first blockbuster. It launched Steven Spielberg's career into the stratosphere. It made audiences afraid to go into the water. It started a successful franchise. Well, it started a franchise. But it did puncture pop culture in a way no film had done before.
It was a shark.
You know the quotes and you know the characters. It's also fairly common knowledge that the mechanical shark on set was named Bruce and often malfunctioned. But making this movie in general was a challenge even a young and mighty Steven Spielberg almost wasn't up for. What went wrong and how did the cast and crew stay above water? Also, what was Spielberg's idea for a prequel that Universal turned down? Let's dive into the 1970s with the film that changed the game forever. This is Jaws. After a young woman named Chrissy is attacked and killed by a predatory force in the ocean, authorities in the small beach town of Amity Island investigate. Chief of Police and new resident Martin Brody takes things seriously enough that he wants to close the beaches, but Mayor Larry Vaughn refuses, stating the upcoming July 4th celebration is the heart of Amity's economic year. When another victim turns up, this time a young boy, panic grips the island. A shark is cited as the cause of the attacks. People from all over soon arrive to hunt it down and claim a $3,000 reward. In the middle of the madness, an oceanographer named Matt Hooper shows up to help. Together with Brody, he rules out a tiger shark killed by some of the bounty hunters as the original culprit and thinks the real deal is a massive great white. Despite their warnings, Vaughn refuses to close the beaches ahead of Independence Day weekend, and another attack transpires, leaving one man dead and Brody's own children nearly fish food. The chief forces the bewildered mayor to pay $10,000 to a local shark hunter named Quint to properly do what needs to be done. Martin and Hooper join the brigade, and the trio embark on a deadly mission to kill the sea dog and save the town. The book that Jaws was based on officially released in 1974. It was Peter Benchley's first novel and quickly became a sensation when it was selected by Reader's Digest and purchased by Bantam Books. Excited by the material, producers Richard D. Zanuck and David Brown purchased the film rights for around $175,000 in 1973, before Jaws even hit the open market. Benchley remained involved. He was given the opportunity to write several screenplay drafts from his original work and eventually appeared in the final film as a news reporter. While the producers thought the novel would make for a good movie, it seemed extremely difficult to adapt from a practical production standpoint. They had a short list of directors in mind and first offered the job to Dick Richards. His vision seemed to clash with the producers, so that offer was rescinded. Enter Steven Spielberg. Zanuck and Brown had just finished working with the 26-year-old director on his first major theatrical release, The Sugarland Express. Spielberg was interested in the new project and hired in June of 1973, prior to Sugarland hitting theaters. The director saw Jaws as a comparable piece to his 1971 TV movie Duel, about a man pursued by a dangerous semi-truck driver and his monstrous big rig. Despite his best efforts, Peter Benchley's passes at a script were not satisfactory to the production team. The author had already removed several bits of backstory from his book at the studio's request, including an affair between Hooper and Ellen Brody and the mayor's association with the mafia. From there, Spielberg himself took a shot, but didn't get the story to a place he wanted. Writer Howard Sackler came on board and shaped up the screenplay. Time was of the essence. With both Writers Guild and Screen Actors Guild strikes threatening, Zanuck and Brown tried to hurry along production. Jamaica was first considered as the shooting location for the fictional Amity Island, but Martha's Vineyard won out. It wasn't previously used as a movie location, and the locals weren't shy about their lack of enthusiasm to host the cast and crew. Spielberg pushed for the island mostly because it was the only place on the East Coast where they'd have a sandy seafloor at only 30 feet deep, 12 miles from shore. The director didn't want land visible at all for the film's third act, and Martha's Vineyard fit the bill. As for the cast, producers were looking for a name actor to play Chief Brody. Spielberg felt differently. He thought too big a star would distract the audience from the film's everyman protagonist. He ultimately settled on the French Connection's Roy Scheider. For Martin's wife Ellen, Lorraine Gary was the director's first choice. She was also the wife of Universal's president, Sid Sheinberg. Spielberg had always wanted to work with veteran actor Murray Hamilton, so he was a shoo-in for Mayor Vaughn as well.
Amity, as you know, means friendship.
The roles of Hooper and Quint were less easy to fill out. In fact, they were still uncast days before principal photography began. Jon Voight was initially offered Hooper and turned it down. A number of other actors were wanted for the job, including Jeff Bridges, but Spielberg ultimately went after Richard Dreyfuss because of 1973's American Graffiti. It was actually George Lucas himself who suggested the actor. Dreyfuss was intimidated by the thought of a shoot at sea and didn't accept the role until a couple months later. Lee Marvin was pursued for Quint, which admittedly would have been awesome, but he wasn't interested. It also didn't work out for Sterling Hayden. English actor Robert Shaw was soon brought up to Spielberg. A fan of his work in The Sting, A Man for All Seasons, and From Russia with Love, an offer was made and Shaw accepted. With the core cast finally set and the location waiting, production got up and running in May of 1974. Jaws started out with a $3.5 million budget and a planned 55-day shoot. That SAG strike was still a possibility, so the producers wanted the film in the can by the end of June. They didn't get their wish. As Spielberg was getting things underway at Martha's Vineyard, a second unit was picking up live shark footage in Australia. Married couple Ron and Valerie Taylor were known for their documentary work and captured some of the movie's most harrowing shots. To make the real sharks look bigger in one of the film's most famous scenes, a smaller scale cage was built and a little person named Carl Rizzo was hired as a stand-in for the Hooper character. They tried using dummies at first, but that didn't yield the results they were looking for. Rizzo was not an experienced diver and understandably nervous about the job. The Taylors did get most of what they needed with him, but one incident nearly cost him his life. Rizzo hesitated to get in the water on one of the shoot days. Before he could climb down, a shark got caught up in the cage equipment. The animal thrashed around violently, not only damaging the cage, but the boat it was attached to. If the actor had been submerged at that time, he would have been killed. Spielberg was so impressed with the footage captured during the episode that he changed the script to use it in the film. Back on the main set, things were constantly changing. The director increasingly encouraged his actors to ad-lib, which created some of the movie's most well-known moments, especially with Robert Shaw's Quint. Helping Spielberg adjust the script as they went along was actor-writer Carl Gottlieb. He played Meadows in the movie, but was really brought on set to punch up the story. It's been said he rewrote just about the entire screenplay during the movie's turbulent production phase. The most infamous hurdle in the shooting process was, of course, the oft-defective mechanical shark. Christened Bruce after Spielberg's lawyer Bruce Raymer, the shark and its effects caused delay after delay. There were multiple versions made for different purposes, but they all had their issues. Powered pneumatically by gas or pressurized air, tubes and other components were always fighting the elements out on the water. This caused the film's most important star to be saddled with quite the temperamental attitude. Bob Maddy and his team took on the massive project after the producers were turned down by several other special effects houses who all said constructing the villain was impossible. The design and mechanics weren't quite perfected in time for the rushed shoot, but despite all the problems, Bruce worked just well enough when they needed him to. What's present in the final film is basically all the usable footage captured. This forced Spielberg and company to come up with alternatives to showing the picture's biggest draw as often as first thought. A minimalistic approach to the animals' appearances helped build Jaws into the thriller it became, but the suspenseful scenes showcasing POV shots, the yellow flotation barrels, and the anticipatory chill of John Williams' seminal theme were necessities at the time. The use of the color red, mostly saved for blood in the water, was also a masterstroke of production design, adding to the threatening nature of the situations our characters were placed in. The director later admitted all these ingredients combined for a more effective and terrifying feature than what was originally conceived. He's compared the movie's style to that of Hitchcock, with its slow ramp-up of tension when the shark is around. As I mentioned in my review of The Birds, it seemed like a lot of that film's DNA specifically was baked into Jaws. Courage and stupidity. Those are the two words Spielberg used to describe how he attacked this production. It ended up being the most difficult shoot of his career, and he would have nightmares about it for years. He called Jaws a fun movie to watch, not a fun movie to make. The main aspect that caused the production so much grief was Spielberg's decision to shoot out on the real ocean, that had never really been done before on this scale. Variables like wind and waves moving shots out of whack, other boats passing by on the distant horizon, and pretty much everyone getting seasick were not taken into account, which meant the loss of valuable time. A good day on the water meant maybe 5 usable shots, but most days weren't good. Sometimes they'd come up empty-handed. Quint's boat, the Orca, even started to sink at one point due to an equipment accident. The camera fell underwater, and the film inside was almost destroyed. Disaster after disaster dragged down the crew's morale. Spielberg's actors were also butting heads. Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss traded barbs, with Shaw often insulting the younger performer. Because of all these issues, there was no timeline on when the movie would wrap shooting. Zanuck and Brown had a tough time deciding to let the production continue on. They feared stopping would be the end of the movie and it'd never get going again. The producers did not pull the plug. Their motto was to keep shooting and make do with what they've got. So Jaws continued on for a total of 159 days. They shot 6 days a week for months on end, with Spielberg never once leaving the island. The production came in nearly 3 times its original budget and finally finished up on October 6th, 1974. Quint's ship, the Orca, quickly encounters the violent force of nature, but it proves powerful and intelligent. They're able to harpoon it with lines attached to flotation barrels and make several failed attempts to take it down. In their battles, the shark damages the boat and its engines. Quint leads the predator closer to shore, where Hooper tries to inject strychnine into its mouth while in a shark cage. The animal foils the plan, destroying the cage, sinking most of the Orca, and killing Quint. In a last-ditch effort, Brody throws a scuba tank in the shark's mouth and is able to line up a shot with his gun, piercing the tank with a bullet. It explodes in spectacular fashion, finally destroying the great white once and for all. Hooper soon rises to the surface after hiding when the cage was ripped apart, and the pair swim back to shore across 2 of the barrels.
Smile, you son of a...
The ending of Peter Benchley's book was called too much of a downer by Spielberg, who wanted a rousing finale for the audience. It most definitely worked, but the director himself wasn't on set to shoot it. The shark explosion was one of the last shots in the whole picture. Fearing his crew would turn on him the second the movie was finished, Spielberg finally left the island before it happened. This led to a tradition on all his movies where he's not present during the final take. The first test screening for Jaws took place at a shopping center in Dallas, Texas. Once the screams from the crowd started, they never stopped. Zanuck, Brown, and Spielberg knew they had a hit on their hands, but being a perfectionist, the director wanted every beat to hit with maximum effect. The now famous jump scare of Ben Gardner's corpse popping out in front of Hooper didn't get enough of a reaction at first. Universal refused to put the money up for a reshoot, so the director spent $3,000 of his own cash to fix it up. He shot it in editor Verna Fields' swimming pool and showed it to some folks behind the scenes, choosing the take that's now in the movie. That moment had the loudest reaction in following screenings. Universal did pay for a reshoot of Hooper in the shark cage. They booked the large tank at MGM Studios, but with Richard Dreyfuss busy on another film, a double was used. The shark cage sequence was an amalgam of 3 different locations and cuts together quite well in the movie. Jaws was close to an R rating because of the blood and gore, but the producers were able to make their case that the violence in the film isn't imitable. The only real change they had to make was cutting a few seconds of a victim's severed leg sinking to the ocean floor. With no PG-13 at the time, the movie was given one of those old-school PG ratings. Important to the success of Jaws was its massive marketing campaign. The trailer, ominously narrated by Percy Rodriguez, is a memorable piece unto itself.
It is as if God created the devil and gave him jaws.
TV and print ads permeated the public consciousness, and the film set a new standard for how big theatrical releases were advertised. The poster, with art by Roger Castell, has to be one of the most iconic ever created, maybe the most iconic. The hype worked. Jaws was released on June 20th, 1975, after successful advanced screenings. It was the first time any film had opened in over 400 theaters. It actually could have been more, but MCA chairman Lou Wasserman wanted to test the movie's drawing power, getting publicity on the lines of moviegoers waiting to get into theaters. Jaws played all summer long and spent 14 weeks at the top of the box office. It also became a hit overseas and established the summer blockbuster as we know it. Audiences were crazy for the film. It was an event and experience like none other at the time, with laughs, shrieks, and cheers all a part of the show. It had horror compared to The Exorcist, mixed with action that invoked seafaring silver screen classics, and it did affect how people perceived going into the water, scaring viewers away for a bit. The movie also sparked the world's major fascination with sharks. Jaws became the centerpiece of pop culture at the time. All the success pushed this monster to the very top of the charts. Jaws was the first film ever to gross over $100 million, and that was just domestically. It kept climbing until it was the biggest financial accomplishment in movie history. The film that supplanted it was 1977's Star Wars. Critics and audiences weren't the only barometer of achievement. Jaws went on to be recognized with several industry awards. Spielberg was not nominated for directing, but Jaws was up for Best Picture at the Academy Awards and took home Oscars for Best Sound, Editing, and John Williams' score. Speaking of the music, it's still one of Williams' most well-known and simple themes. Spielberg was a fan of the composer and finally got to work with him on the Sugarland Express, vowing to use him on future films as much as possible. When Williams played the director his idea for the Jaws main theme, Spielberg thought he was joking. He said it was too basic, but after John played it a few more times, the director understood what his friend was going for. Now, Spielberg says the music is responsible for half the success of the movie. Williams thought of Jaws as a pirate film. It's primal and terrifying, but also fun and entertaining. That would explain some of his vast tonal shifts. I understand why it was done that way, and I caught the ode to nautical themes. Maybe it's just a modern sensibility, but I feel like those shifts from dramatic, driving, and dark to chipper and bright could have been a little more subtle. Universal capitalized off its mega hit, and Jaws merchandise became almost as popular as the movie. T-shirts, figures, and higher-end collector's items are still popular today. Peter Benchley's novel sold millions of copies off the back of the film, and interest in the wild behind-the-scenes details generated even more revenue for the studio. The Jaws log, written by Carl Gottlieb, delved into everything it took to bring the shark to screen, proving popular among amateur filmmakers. The legend of the film's creation became part of its identity early on, something few, if any, movies had experienced before. Admiration among the masses spawned plenty of imitators in the ensuing years, pretty much creating a subgenre. The influence it's had over filmmakers goes without saying, as everyone from J.J. Abrams to Christopher Nolan have been inspired by Jaws. As for the rest of the franchise, 3 sequels followed, all without the involvement of Spielberg. Each installment saw a decrease in critical acclaim and audience enthusiasm. The legacy of the series continued in the Universal Studios theme parks, where attractions were built to remind fans of the glory days. Even with a decline in interest regarding the subsequent films, it's easy to see Jaws has not left our collective imaginations half a century after it came out. There was one concept in the early years that could have not only brought the series to a completely different level, but brought Spielberg back. Originally, Universal wanted the director to return for another round, but the only way he'd agree was if he was given the opportunity to tell a prequel story. It would have followed Quint and the destruction of the USS Indianapolis. The studio turned the idea down, and Spielberg moved on. Who wouldn't have wanted to see that? Knowledge of the Indianapolis wasn't the most common at the time, with plenty of folks learning about it through Jaws, and they were riding the back of a lightning bolt with that first movie. Quint is probably the most recognizable character in the franchise, so I don't see much of a downside. It would have been a heck of a way to grow the brand. Unfortunately, we'll never know how it would have done. Then again, we may not have had one of Spielberg's other classic films, so maybe it was for the best. The story Quint tells of his survival during that incident is the best part of the film for many fans. I'd probably agree with that.
You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes.
Howard Sackler was the first writer who assigned Quint his monologue, but it was only a few paragraphs at first. Spielberg sent the dialogue to his friend John Milius, who expanded on it substantially. Robert Shaw felt it was too long, though. Being a writer himself, he rewrote it for his character as it appears in the movie. If you aren't familiar with the full details of the USS Indianapolis, I'd suggest looking it up. It's a World War II story that's as important as it is terrifying. I didn't grow up watching Jaws. It just wasn't one of the Spielberg movies on repeat in my house when I was younger, but I was well aware of the massive shadow it cast. Seeing the full movie for the first time as an adult some years ago, I was able to pick up on why this film is so well regarded from a narrative and tonal perspective, while originating many of the spectacle-type flicks we've seen in the decades since. It's easy to respect Jaws and all the work that went on behind the scenes. Spielberg's camera movements, from the famous Zolly shot to his use of transitions to the perspective of the unseen threat from the deep, teach the viewers a visual language he can rely on, but also upset when he wants to make us jump. That's why Ben Gardner's head popping out or the shark showing up when Brody is chumming are so effective. The director was honing his craft as a manipulator of emotions and learned even more during those test screenings. His little setups and payoffs are brilliant. After watching it so recently, there's definitely some creature from the Black Lagoon in here, and I already mentioned the birds as a probable inspiration for certain things. I'm sure the production team were pulling from other well-known older movies as well, pushing some of those ideas further to great success. Jaws likely surpassed all its influences not long after it hit theaters. The cast all embody these characters. There's a commotion and constant overlapping of speech that make things feel natural but also tense. We see that early on in Brody's home, but again at the town hall meeting, and it just keeps going up and up. By the time Hooper, Brody, and Quint set out on their mission, we don't even need a ton of people to create an uncomfortable conflict. These three guys all want to kill that shark for different reasons and all have individual strengths and weaknesses. They bond in that fantastic scene below deck, but clash when working together. They have to figure it out in real time, which is why we're so invested. If I could think of any negatives considering my lack of significant nostalgia for this movie, I'd only really point out a few nitpicks. The music shifts I've already spoken on, but a slightly more substantial thing I noticed was the pacing in the back half of the movie. Now, everyone talks about how perfectly structured Jaws is, and I see their point. The events play out in a way that builds well to the climax. I just feel like our heroes are out at sea a little too long. It's about 50 minutes from the time they set sail to the credits rolling. Their mistakes with the shark become just a touch redundant, and I could have used another scene or two of them talking below deck instead. I'm sure it's sacrilege to say, but maybe cutting 5 to 10 minutes wouldn't have been the worst? I know, I'm probably way off compared to most people on that. It's just how I felt on this last rewatch. On my personal list of Spielberg's filmography, I wouldn't put this movie too close to the top, but we wouldn't have those other films I'm more fond of without Jaws. I can't imagine what it would have been like to see it on opening weekend back in 1975. I think about that kind of stuff often with these event films from before my time. I had experiences like 2002 Spider-Man, The Dark Knight, and Avengers Endgame to compare it to, but there's something about that bygone age that is so attractive. If by chance you're watching this and you saw Jaws in theaters in 1975, what was your experience? I want to hear about it in the comments below. Special thanks to 50 years worth of special features, and specifically the documentaries The Making of Jaws and The Shark is Still Working, The Impact and Legacy of Jaws, for the info presented here. Go check out those docs if you haven't. Also, head on over to the Walter Culture YouTube channel for more content. Next time on Juniversal, we won't be covering a film Spielberg directed, but he is in it. Take us out, boys.
Show me the way to go home.